Horse for sale, 80% off. Urgent sale. The urgent words, accompanied by a picture of a skinny, tired horse, flooded Olivia Bennett's screen, taking her by surprise. The tone of the ad feels like a last-ditch effort to sell the horse quickly. She frowned, her chest tightening as she studied the horse's sunken eyes and frail body. Olivia had spent years rescuing and rehabilitating horses in distress, with an unwavering belief that every animal deserved another chance. Is this horse in such bad shape that they're offering 80% off? She thought. Her savings had nearly been depleted when she founded the Horse Rescue and Rehabilitation Center, but the sight of the horse stopped her from hesitating any longer, and Olivia took a deep breath, regained her composure, and picked up the phone. He's still here, but let me be clear. He's not easy to handle. His tone carried a mix of warning and exasperation, as if he had grown tired of trying to sell the animal. Olivia's grip on the phone tightened, but her determination did not waver. If no one else was willing to care, how could she turn her back? The farm was on the outskirts of town, surrounded by overgrown fields and skeletal trees swaying in the breeze. The houses peeling paint and the barn's looming silhouette told a story of neglect. As Olivia approached, a middle-aged man with a rough, stubbled jaw stepped out, his eyes sharp and assessing. "You called me about that stubborn horse, didn't you?" he said, his tone blunt, but with a note of relief that someone had actually shown up. "Yes, I'm Olivia," she replied, nodding politely. He gave her a once-over, his skepticism evident. "Well, Olivia, I hope you're serious." "Come on, I'll show you." The barn's interior was dim and carried the faint scent of dust and hay. A few horses peered curiously from their stalls as they passed. When Olivia reached the last stall, her heart sank. The horse from the ad stood half hidden in the shadows. His once rich bay coat was dulled, marred by scars, old lash marks, burns, and patches where the fur would never regrow. The horse's coal dark eyes briefly met hers before darting away. His rigid body pressed against the stall wall, every muscle tense with silent fear. Olivia felt a deep ache in her chest. This wasn't aggression. It was terror. "What happened to him?" she asked softly, almost to herself. Frank Miller snorted dismissively. "Waste of a good horse. He had potential once, but it's too late now. Can't go near him without him dropping to the ground. Tried everything, but he's not worth the time or the feed." Her throat tightened. "He's been abused," she whispered, steadying her voice. Frank shrugged. "Some animals are just born wrong. I'd sell him to the glue factory if I could, might make more off him that way." The cruelty in his tone was harder for Olivia to bear than the horse's physical state. "How much are you asking?" she managed. "1,500, he replied, watching her reaction closely. The price was steep for Olivia, who was barely scraping by as she built her center. But as her gaze lingered on the horse's haunted eyes, she knew she couldn't leave him behind. "I'll need to think about it," she said finally, her voice tinged with guilt. "I'll call you back." Frank shrugged indifferently. "Suit yourself, but don't wait too long. He won't be here much longer." For days, Olivia couldn't shake the image of the horse. His trembling body and hollow eyes haunted her thoughts, but so did the practical realities of her situation. She couldn't ignore the financial strain, the enormous risk. Yet every time she resolved to let him go, her heart rebelled. One evening, her phone buzzed unexpectedly. The caller ID showed Frank's number. Seeing Frank Miller's number on the screen sent a jolt of tension through her. "Still interested?" he asked brusquely. "Horse auctions tomorrow. He'll go to anyone foolish enough to take him. Figured I'd give you one last chance. $250. No questions." Olivia hesitated, her heart racing. The price was low, tempting enough to consider, but it also made one thing painfully clear. Zavo had no other hope. Something deep within her shifted, a resolve sharper than ever. "I'll be there," she answered, her voice steady with determination. The auction yard was alive with restless animals and the low hum of murmured negotiations. Olivia scanned the area, searching for the horse Zavo. In a shadowed corner, she finally saw him. His head hung low, legs trembling under his gaunt frame. Surrounded by powerful, polished horses, he looked utterly out of place, like a forgotten relic. His ribs jutted sharply beneath his matted coat, and his eyes stared into an invisible void, as if the chaos around him didn't exist. Frank spotted her and smirked, motioning her over. "Told you I'd give you a shot, but don't expect miracles," he drawled, loud enough for the nearby crowd to hear. "He's worth no more than the meat on his bones." Laughter and pitying looks rippled through the bystanders, but Olivia ignored them. Without a word, she handed Frank $250 and accepted the frayed leather lead rope. Its roughness mirrored the neglect etched into Zavo's thin frame. Frank's smirk widened as she walked away with the horse. To him, her actions must have seemed absurd, even naive. Olivia, however, didn't falter. She led Zavo to her trailer, speaking to him in soothing tones. When they reached the ramp, he froze, his body rigid, his head bowed as though the weight of the world rested on his back. Olivia knelt to meet his fearful gaze, her voice steady and calm. "It's okay. You're safe now," she murmured, coaxing him gently. Zavo hesitated, but eventually took cautious steps forward. Each movement seemed like an agonizing struggle, both physical and emotional. Olivia's breath caught as the trailer door finally shut behind them, silencing the jeers from the auction yard. Back at her modest barn, she led him to a quiet stall she'd carefully prepared with fresh hay and water. It wasn't grand, but it was warm and safe. She unclipped his lead rope, whispering, "Welcome home, Zavo." The horse flinched at the sound of her voice, but didn't move. Instead, he pressed himself against the wall, as though willing himself to vanish. Olivia didn't push. She had seen broken horses before, but Zavo's shattered spirit was unlike anything she had ever encountered. For days, Zavo remained in the corner of his stall. He refused to eat if she was nearby, and only drank water when she left. Any attempt to approach him sent him retreating against the wall, his breath coming in sharp, panicked bursts. If she reached out her hand, he would brace himself, trembling, sinking to the ground, as if anticipating another blow. Each flinch carved a deeper ache in Olivia's heart, and her anger toward his past treatment grew. She kept her distance, tending to him with quiet care. Food and water were left within reach, her presence marked only by soft words meant to reassure him. Zavo never looked at her, but she hoped he could sense her intention, a silent vow that he was safe. One grey, rainy afternoon, Olivia called Dr. Laura Bennett to evaluate Zavo. The vet's expression darkened as she examined the horse's injuries. When she finally turned to Olivia, her voice was solemn. "He's endured more than most could survive, Doctor," Bennett said softly. "Old scars from whips and burns, pressure wounds from chains. Physically, he'll heal with time and care. But the emotional trauma..." Her words trailed off, her gaze shifting to Zavo, who stood in the corner with his head lowered. "Is there any chance he can learn to trust again?" Olivia asked, her voice heavy with worry. Dr. Bennett hesitated, then nodded slightly. "It'll be a long road, and there's no guarantee. But if anyone can help him, it's someone with your patience. Be ready. It could take years, and even then, he may never fully recover." Olivia thanked the vet, her resolve deepening. Zavo had suffered unimaginable pain, but she was determined to show him a world where kindness and safety replaced fear and despair. Her words faltered, her gaze drifting to Zavo, whose head hung low, his eyes barely open. "Is there any way to help him trust again?" Olivia asked, her voice tinged with quiet desperation. Dr. Laura Bennett nodded slightly. "It's going to be a long journey, and there are no promises. But if anyone can do it, it's someone with your patience. Just know, it might take years, and even then, he may never fully recover. Olivia thanked the vet and returned to the barn, her determination growing stronger. She knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, yet she felt an unshakable connection to Zavo, a commitment to guide him through, no matter how long it might take. In the weeks that followed, Olivia dedicated herself to Zavo's care. She established what she called the healing circle, a slow, deliberate process designed to rebuild his confidence. Each day, she adhered to a strict routine, showing him kindness and granting him space. She spent hours sitting quietly in his stall, reading aloud or softly humming, allowing Zavo to grow accustomed to her presence without fear. Progress was excruciatingly slow, but one evening, a small breakthrough changed everything. As she sat near the stall, her voice calm as she read from a book, Zavo shifted slightly, turning his head toward her. Olivia froze, holding her breath. Though he didn't look away, she resisted the urge to react, continuing to read. The next day, when she entered the stall, he no longer flinched as violently. While he still kept to the wall, he no longer collapsed in fear. Each small step forward felt monumental, and Olivia celebrated them all, reminding herself of the immense effort behind each tiny sign of trust. One afternoon, Olivia decided to test Zavo's progress. She extended her hand, fingers open, stopping just short of touching him. Zavo's eyes darted nervously, but he didn't retreat. Olivia remained motionless, her voice a soft reassurance. "It's okay, Zavo. I'll wait as long as you need." Then, in a moment she would never forget, Zavo leaned forward ever so slightly, his nose inching closer to her hand. He recoiled almost immediately, pressing back against the wall, but to Olivia, it was enough. Her heart swelled with hope. Zavo was beginning to trust her. That evening, as she secured the barn for the night, Olivia lingered by his stall, watching him settle into the fresh hay. His body seemed to lose some of its tension, his shoulders relaxing as though he finally felt safe. She whispered, "Good night, Zavo." Her words a quiet blend of hope and gratitude. For the first time in his life, Zavo was in a place where patience replaced punishment, where no harm would come to him. As months passed, their journey became a delicate balance of perseverance and progress. Each step Zavo took toward trusting Olivia felt like a triumph, though the path was far from linear. Some days, he allowed her to stand close, even to touch his face briefly. On others, he recoiled at the slightest movement, retreating into his old habits, haunted by the specters of his past. Then came the night of the storm. The winds howled, and rain pounded the barn's roof as lightning split the sky. Olivia, preparing to leave, decided to stay, knowing the storm would likely unsettle Zavo. She found him trembling in his stall, his wide eyes filled with terror. Thunder cracked, and he reared before collapsing to the ground in a panic, his breaths coming in frantic, shallow bursts. He was lost in the grip of memories far beyond Olivia's reach. She knelt nearby, her voice soft and steady, despite the ache in her chest. "It's okay, Zavo. You're safe now. I'm not going anywhere." Hours passed as she remained by his side, her hand resting gently on the ground, close enough to offer comfort without encroaching on his space. When the storm finally subsided, Zavo exhaled deeply, his head dropping mere inches from her outstretched fingers. Olivia stayed until dawn, her presence a silent promise of safety and understanding. By morning, something had shifted. As she cleaned his stall, Zavo watched her closely, his gaze curious rather than fearful. For the first time, his eyes reflected a glimmer of trust. Encouraged by this progress, Olivia knew their bond was growing, forged through countless moments of patience and unwavering care. Zavo's journey wasn't just about healing, it was about rediscovering the strength buried deep within both of them. The following morning, something shifted in Zavo. As Olivia cleaned his stall, she noticed his eyes lingering on her face, the usual fear giving way to a hesitant curiosity. It was the first time his gaze seemed less guarded, a small yet profound change. To Olivia, this was a breakthrough, a glimmer of trust beginning to surface. Encouraged by this progress, Olivia decided to try something new. She'd often seen Zavo show interest whenever the other horses trained in the pasture, especially during jumping exercises. While the idea was risky, she believed that introducing him to movement might help him rediscover a sense of freedom long buried. Olivia set up a modest jump in a far paddock, a simple, low bar that the other horses enjoyed clearing with ease. She led Zavo to the edge, holding the lead rope loosely to let him explore without pressure. Zavo's eyes widened at the sight of the obstacle, his ears flicking back as a mix of apprehension and curiosity stirred within him. They stood there in quiet stillness, Olivia giving him the space to decide. Slowly, Zavo took a tentative step forward, his gaze fixed on the jump. With a gentle nudge of encouragement, Olivia coaxed him to trot forward. He hesitated, then awkwardly hopped over the low bar. It was far from graceful, but Olivia saw a spark of something long lost, a flicker of joy in his eyes. She couldn't help but smile softly, seeing the potential hidden within him, waiting to awaken. In the following weeks, Olivia incorporated more jumps into their routine. Each bar was slightly higher, each challenge met with growing strength. Zavo's initial trepidation began to fade, replaced by a cautious excitement. As he grew more agile and confident, the quiet bond between them deepened. One afternoon, after Zavo completed a particularly smooth jump, Olivia reached out, running her hand gently along his neck. To her amazement, he didn't flinch or pull away. Instead, he pressed his nose against her shoulder, his breath warm and steady. In that moment, Olivia knew she had earned a trust she never thought possible. With Zavo's confidence soaring, Olivia began to wonder if they were ready for something bigger, a real competition. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. Zavo had come so far, but the chaos of a crowded event could overwhelm him. Yet the idea of showcasing his newfound strength, proving to the world that he was more than his past, was too compelling to ignore. One evening, Olivia signed them up for a small regional jumping event. The environment would be controlled, with fewer spectators and low stakes, designed for beginners. For days, Olivia meticulously prepared, guiding Zavo through routines that built his confidence step by step. But just a week before the competition, a setback shook her resolve. While grooming Zavo, an unknown noise startled him, perhaps an echo of a memory only he could see. He bolted into the stall wall, his eyes wild with panic. Letting out a desperate whinny, he collapsed onto the ground, his body trembling in a pose of utter submission. Olivia's heart ached as she knelt beside him, her voice soft and steady, whispering words of comfort until his breathing slowed. She resisted the urge to touch him, allowing him to rise on his own. The moment passed, but doubt crept in. Was she pushing him too far, asking him to overcome a pain still fresh in his mind? Watching Zavo recover, Olivia realized how fragile his progress was and how easily she could lose him back to his fears. As the competition drew near, Olivia's uncertainty lingered. Yet, every time she saw Zavo watching the other horses train, his eyes lit with a yearning for movement. His determination mirrored her own, and on the eve of the event, she sat outside his stall, speaking to him in the quiet of the barn. "You don't have to do this if you're not ready, Zavo," she whispered, her voice filled with sincerity. "No matter what happens tomorrow, you've already shown me a strength I could never imagine." Zavo met her gaze, his eyes steady and calm. He let out a soft nicker, and for the first time, Olivia felt a connection beyond words, a partnership that could face anything together. No matter the outcome, they would take on the challenge as a team. The morning of the competition arrived with a crisp, golden light spilling over the paddocks and the rolling hills in the distance. Olivia Bennett's hands trembled slightly as she ran a brush over Zavo's coat, each stroke deliberate and gentle. She could feel his tension, a mix of apprehension and anticipation, his muscles taut with the understanding that today was unlike any other. As they reached the bustling competition grounds, the hum of the crowd settled over Olivia like a familiar weight. Riders prepared their mounts in organized chaos, and horses trotted with fluid grace, their glossy coats reflecting the morning sun. Zavo shifted uneasily beside her, his head jerking up at every unfamiliar sound and scent. Olivia kept a firm but calm grip on his lead, her voice a steadying rhythm to ground him. Their event was modest, a low-level jumping course of 8 obstacles in a compact ring. The audience quieted as the first competitors completed their runs, some greeted with cheers, others with sighs of disappointment. Olivia forced herself to tune out the noise, focusing entirely on Zavo, who observed the ring with a cautious, curious gaze. When their number was called, Olivia took a deep, steadying breath. She guided Zavo into the arena, feeling his hesitation ripple through the lead. Leaning close, she whispered softly, "I'm right here, Zavo. We've got this." The starting bell sounded, and Olivia gave a gentle nudge. Zavo moved forward, tentative but obedient, his ears flicking back as if seeking reassurance. They approached the first jump, a low bar he had cleared countless times during training. He hesitated, his body taut, but Olivia's quiet encouragement propelled him forward. His leap was clumsy but sufficient, and the murmurs of the crowd gave Olivia a flicker of confidence. Each successive jump seemed to build his momentum. Zavo found a tentative rhythm, his strides growing more purposeful. By the 5th obstacle, a slightly higher bar, he moved with a confidence Olivia had rarely seen. Her heart swelled as their connection deepened with each leap. But as they turned a corner toward the 6th jump, a sudden clanging bell from the stands, followed by laughter, shattered the moment. Zavo froze, his eyes wide and wild. Rearing up, his front legs clawed the air, and Olivia's heart leapt with fear. For a split second, she thought he might bolt or collapse. Instinctively, she leaned forward, her hand brushing his neck as she murmured softly, "It's okay, Zavo. You're safe. I'm here." The arena held its collective breath as Olivia's calm words anchored him. Slowly, his legs returned to the ground, his body trembling, but no longer panicked. She gave him time to steady himself before urging him forward again. Zavo hesitated, but ultimately stepped toward the jump. With a final, trusting push, he soared over the bar, his landing smooth and graceful. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, not from fear, but from the profound trust Zavo had placed in her. The remaining jumps blurred into a triumphant rhythm, and as they crossed the finish line, applause erupted around them. Olivia leaned down, her hand resting on Zavo's mane as she whispered, "We did it, Zavo. You did it." They hadn't won the event. Another rider had finished faster. But for Olivia, this was a victory beyond any trophy. The pride radiating from Zavo as they exited the ring was reward enough. That evening, back at the center, Olivia led Zavo into his stall. He settled into the fresh hay with a calm she had never seen before. Leaning against the door, Olivia watched him, reflecting on their journey. Zavo had taught her that healing was not a straight path, but one of patience, setbacks, and quiet triumphs. His resilience had strengthened her own, showing her that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt with care. As months passed, word of Zavo's story spread. Visitors flocked to the center, drawn by the tale of the once unmanageable horse who had learned to trust again. Olivia told them the unvarnished truth. Zavo was not a miracle, but a testament to what love and patience could achieve. One evening, Sophie Williams, a young girl with wide, curious eyes, approached Zavo's stall. She gazed at him in awe before turning to Olivia and asking, "Is he really the same horse they said couldn't be saved?" Olivia knelt to meet Sophie's gaze and smiled. "Yes, he is. He just needed someone to believe in him." Zavo nickered softly, leaning his head over the stall door. Olivia rested her hand gently against his face, feeling the warmth of his breath as a reminder of how far they had come together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft golden glow over the pasture, Olivia realized Zavo's spirit was no longer just mended. It had grown into something unbreakable, a light that would inspire all who heard his story.